if I'm not the target market, I may not understand it. That's fine. But, ultimately, that's the question every business has to answer. What are you
Yeah.
solving for? What pain or problem? How are you helping the end user?
Welcome to Becoming Radical. Excited to be here with everybody again today. I am with Kurt Elster, one of the most trusted independent Shopify experts in the world, from what I understand. Kurt, it is great to have you here, man. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate you, and excited to share your radical journey with our listeners and viewers.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know we had a little bit of a delay here in getting started, but I am stoked to be here with you and to educate people on what you've been doing as the founder, the host of, if I have it right, the Unofficial Shopify Podcast. Is that
That's
right?
right. That's right.
500 episodes in, from what I understand just now. Very, very exciting. I have some questions here for you, and we can go in any direction, but I really just want to highlight what you've done, what you're doing, and what you're trying to build, bigger picture. And what's cool about that is it really gets our listeners and our viewers engaged with that story and helps them understand, how they can do something similar or different from what you've done in their own industry. Uh, you know, Before we get into it, your insights have been featured in Shopify Plus, which I love Shopify, big fan, Forbes and Entrepreneur, and you're working with some of the most successful brands on the platform. You know, Knowing you've done this and you've worked with hundreds of Shopify stores, what do you think separates the ones that succeed from the ones that don't succeed or stall?
Oh, there's so many things and there's just so many ways to get distracted. Yeah. So number one is like, hey, can you maintain focus? Can you keep going? And then number two is like, hey, do you have a good product? I mean, anyone who's a professional service provider in this industry offering marketing to D2C brands, you have those situations where it's like, oh yeah, hey, help us audit our site. It doesn't convert. It's like, okay, you can have the best site in the world, but if you don't have those fundamentals done, it's not going to work out. Product, story, like those are the two. You, and for everything in business, I always go back to immediately, what pain or problem does this solve? And if I'm not the target market, I may not understand it. That's fine. But, ultimately, that's the question every business has to answer. What are you solving for? What pain or problem? How are you helping the end user?
100%. You're so spot on. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it is solving problems. It's developing solutions. And then, we always talk about on the other side of my life, just like you, with running an agency, digital agency, we talk about radical differentiators. What makes you radically different? And how do we bring those radical experiences to life? Because that's a big part of it too. It's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of noise. How do we lean into the signal, right? What are some of the most common mistakes you see brands make with their Shopify site? If we're talking about Shopify, what mistakes do you see? Those common ones.
Okay, my pet peeve, the one I harp on a lot, is main menu navigation. And you land on a site and it'll say like, in the header, it's like logo, and then it'll be like home, shop, about, FAQ, contact. And it really shouldn't be. If I go, the big box stores teach us how to shop. Amazon specifically, it's something like 50% of every e-commerce dollar in the US gets spent on Amazon. And so that's the expectation and the standard. And if I go on the top 10, Best Buy, Home Depot, Walmart, eBay, marketplaces, and stores, all their main menu, all of them will be exclusively product or collection. There will not be this other nonsense, and certainly will not be like a nested nightmare drop down that says shop, and that's it. That's the whole point of the site, the homepage. Get them the product or collection, and and everybody messes it up. And it's just not that hard to get right. Then if they do get it right, right, it's like purely product and collection in that main menu, then they get too granular in nesting it, where I don't want that because it creates click debt, where it's like I'm on the homepage, click on a main menu item, click on a sub menu item, click on a sub menu. I'm already 3 clicks in. I haven't left the homepage. Well, that's extra friction. And so I think, you know, but people don't want to work on the fundamentals, right? It's easier to chase shiny toys and I want this app and this new feature and this exciting AI thing. Let's just get the main menu right.
Get the foundational stuff right. Exactly.
You have to nail the fundamentals first. And so it's like, is the site easy to use? Does it reduce friction? Do you know who your audience is and why they buy, what problem you're solving for, and can you, communicate that clearly in your copy? A lot of, when we've done conversion rate optimization work and split testing, the biggest gains often come from just language, just changing text, not, elaborate layouts and stuff. So being able to explain, what you do, why people should care, understanding, probably through surveys and talking to customers, what resonates. That's the stuff that really helps, nail those fundamentals. And then you could do the fun stuff, the design and the apps and the features, all that good stuff.
Yep. Get your messaging right, get your strategy right, get the foundational stuff right. You're absolutely correct. It's incredible to see how little things can be such a big thing in the grand scheme of things, and you're right. It's overlooked, it's underserved, understated. I think we see this a lot in Shopify and ecom, but we also see it a lot in B2B. We work with a lot of B2B brands as well, and it's a very common mistake. So if we're talking Shopify, what does a high converting product page look like in 2025? Are there elements every store should have, or elements that you would consider are vital to make it highly converting?
All right, this is a good question. I think it's easy to over optimize here. Uh, and yeah, ultimately, it goes back to get the fundamentals right. And in this case, Google Shopping, if you want to submit your store, your products to Google Shopping, they will look at your product page and vet it. And if you don't have these core elements, they will say it's generic and they'll kick you out. So you got to have product title, price with currency, which a dollar sign counts, inventory status. Am I gonna get my stuff? Is this even in stock? I think that's missed a lot. Like, just stating in stock can be helpful. An obvious add to cart button. Ideally, it's above the fold, but I think that's less important. But it's an easy win if it works with the layout and the product photo, and then, like, a brief description. But the description, even in all those, like, top 10 big box stores I rattled off, none of them have the description above the fold anymore. And so it's like, all right, if you could nail those basic elements, they look right, the product photos are so important, and get that stuff above the fold on desktop and make it obvious and easy to scroll through on mobile, and don't get caught up with like animations and scroll jacking and parallaxing and too much fancy stuff. Okay, that's gonna work. And then I think the one like CRO, the one optimization I think people should do that they miss out on is what's called, in copywriting, a Johnson box. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Frank Johnson, who died, many years ago, got credit for this idea. You highlight the message of a sales letter at the top and like call it out. And so in a product detail page, somewhere like above the title or between title and price, we'll try to have a customer quote call out where, we do like part of a customer review or testimonial. It's got to be real, of course, and put it in there as long as it really does a great job of encapsulating the offer. Like, someone just says something so amazing in a review describing your product that's like, yes, they get it. This is why we do this. If you have one of those, absolutely you want that Johnson box. You wanna have that pull quote as part of the form. But I think that's it. Like, everything after that just needs to bust objections, just needs to answer questions. Those fancy long form sales pages that have all kinds of details, you need that if, you wanna optimize for conversion rate. Like, I want an accordion menu with what's in the box. I want a video where the founder walks me through it. Like, those are all nice to have, so those will help. But until I get that first part right and I'm selling, I really shouldn't be bothering with the other stuff because I don't quite know yet why people are buying and why they aren't buying.
Right. Yeah, it's totally fair. No, it's those are really good points. Has your philosophy on CRO for our listeners, for our viewers, CRO, conversion rate optimization, has your philosophy on CRO changed over the years? Have you seen a shift in what you've thought could work and now is working better, or isn't working? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, part of it is people's expectations change, trends change. People get more sophisticated and intelligent as they get used to their tools. Like, the pandemic really evolved how sophisticated a lot of people were with how they use and interact with their devices and the internet and shop online. And so that's kind of, and it's like the expectations for what is easy or what is too complicated, that shifted toward, more complex can be okay sometimes. But then the other thing that's changed is like video. Video can now be a really big help. And depending on the audience, especially if they skew younger, there may be expectation of it. So certainly like I think consumer preference has changed, trends change, you gotta think about that. But then like the core part of it, communicate the messaging, make it easy, reduce friction, bust objections, that stuff doesn't change, right? That's been universal for 100 years.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree. With so many Shopify stores out there, I mean, there's endless Shopify stores out there. How do you help clients stand out? Like what's the MO for that? How do we get them to radically differentiate? What is the path forward there?
Well, it's so dependent on category and audience, right? Like, if I'm selling fidget spinners, I know that there is a finite time on that, and in which that business is gonna be successful. And so in that instance, I probably want to make the spammiest looking store ever, like, just intentionally and make that part of the tone and have fun with it, and, like, it just this very novelty-driven experience, and it's gotta be flashy. But, that'll work where it's an inexpensive item. But now if I'm selling, a more expensive item, a more durable item, a longer item, I'm building a brand. Okay, there's the difference. Are we just trying to make money on a trend? Right? We're drop shipping, or are we building a brand here? Okay, if I'm building a brand, now my focus is going to become storytelling, and I'm going to be much more focused on copywriting. And I absolutely don't want a spammy experience, and maybe instead of like a welcome offer, and I'm going to do free gift with purchase, but it's like a branded sticker pack, right? Um, there, you know, the approach is going to change. Um, but all right, I think the one you're interested in is gonna be, the person building the longer brand that wants to do this at least 10 years, then, scale it, sell it, whatever. I think it's really focusing on, I need a very polished experience. I need to be empathetic in why the customer's buying and why they may not want to, and then actively work toward, involving all of that in my messaging. So essentially, it comes down to hold up the mirror. If I land on that product detail page and through the title photo, the Johnson box, and like a few bullet points, I can immediately recognize myself in it. In that I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be nice. Like, oh, that does sound convenient. Oh, that would solve an annoyance for me. Ah, like suddenly, okay, now we're talking. And so that's where I want to be able to recognize myself, my situation, my problem in the copy, in the storytelling and the brand.
Hold up that mirror. You're right. Absolutely. We think about big things, big changes for big impact, right? But oftentimes we undervalue small tweaks and how big those impacts can be on sales, right? Do you know of an example you can think of where there was a small tweak that was made on a Shopify site and it had a big impact on sales? Maybe that's messaging, maybe that's product placement, maybe it's something else. Any example that you could share, if any.
Recently, we did one where on a product page, you could choose between various sizes of the product and like, packaging formats. And there was one where, by unit, by serving size, we knew this is actually, cheapest per serving, but it was also the most expensive individual cost. And so we split tested it. We put a badge on there that said best value. And only when like that option was available, we didn't even surface the badge all the time. And so it kind of like popped in, and in doing that, conversion rate did not change, right? Add to cart rate did not change, but the option the people picked changed. And so we were able to optimize for AOV. And when you optimize for AOV, average order value pays dividends, right? If suddenly every order is 10% more, I don't have to change traffic. I don't have to change conversion rate, and I don't have to change reorder rate. Suddenly, the business makes 10% more top line revenue. Well, that's incredible. Um, so I think, AOV as a KPI, key performance indicator, is definitely overlooked. People tend to focus on, well, how much traffic can I get? What can I get my conversion rate to? When really that AOV is like just can have an outsized impact. Um, yeah, like that one we were surprised by. Other times the stuff that like you think matters and maybe it mattered on a different site, you test it, turns out like it just doesn't for that audience. Um, it, an interesting one to try, assuming you have the traffic to do split testing, because it could take quite a bit, is price on collection or category pages. Depending on the brand, it'll help hurt or make no difference, but there is no way to know unless you test this one. And so that's a fun one to try.
Cool. Cool. No, those are great examples. How do you think brands should think about balancing automation with personalization in today's day and age?
Ooh, this is fun. Yeah, it definitely starts to get into the AI question.
Yeah,
And
it does. Yeah.
it, very few people are actually using AI in their daily life.
That's right.
So at realistically, I think it's at most 1 in 6 in America. Um, but for sure, you see it in social media. You see it on comments and discussions on the internet. AI slop. If someone can recognize AI generated content, they're like, "Ugh, disgusting." Like, they want nothing to do with it.
That's absolutely
Uh,
true.
and so I think that's a thing to avoid, is, like, either be real upfront that, "Hey, you're about to interact with an AI," so that the expectation changes, or be extremely certain that it's perfect, that they can't figure it out.
Yeah,
Um
it's so true. We're seeing that a lot. And we had on a guest recently on the show named Sam, and he talked about AI in Fortune 500 environments, right? And they do a lot of research attached to MIT. Very exciting stuff. Said that about 11% are actually notably using AI. And the rest is all noise and fluff. It's all, like you said, a bunch of slop out there at times. And this isn't just limited to Fortune 500. We see this with startups, e-commerce brands, individuals, personal brands. You're right. You've got to be real and authentic. Cover it up really well if you can, or be very human, which is good too. So there are ways to really work on that and optimize that. And I think that's really important, to think about, because when we talk about balancing automation and personalization in today's day and age, that AI debacle is such a crazy thing to think about, and it's changing lightning fast. So you're absolutely right. If you think about copywriting in e-commerce, how important is that? What do you think most people get wrong in today's day and age with copywriting, content strategy around e-commerce specifically?
Well, all right, the one I hear a lot is people don't read. Well, some people do, some people don't, and they probably start with skimming no matter what. And so, you know, I think you want to lead with bullet points. You want to use quick headlines, taglines, bold key phrases, you know, and legibility is so important. Like, that's often one of the first things we do in a conversion rate project is like, "Hey, is this even legible? If I squint at this, can I read it?"
Yeah.
Um, and so I think like you start there with the basics, just make it readable. Readability is an art. And all right, if I get that right, great. But probably the biggest mistake you'll see, especially on like earlier stage brands, is they talk about themselves in the first person. We at Acme Corp welcome you to our website. You're like, oh God, please don't. When the reality is, if the chances are your customer is sitting on their couch, distracted, they've got their phone, the microwave's going, and the TV's on, and they're like trying to scroll through this thing. And so if it's hard to read, they're out. They're not reading it. And all right, if I could scan it, I can read it, I could digest it, great. But it needs to be focused on me, right? I don't care about you. I'm on your website because you interrupted me scrolling through Instagram. Now tell me what I'm here. Tell me what you could do for me. And so you want like that very you focused experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
it's very fair.
for, copywriting and e-commerce, this is where I think, AI really shines. It is absolutely phenomenal at copy editing, right? And I think, with AI, garbage in, garbage out. If you just sit down and go, write me a description for this, they'll be okay. But if you can give it like, hey, here's my description, and here's our tone of voice, and here's our audience, you get lots of context, and then say, hey, now tell it, all right, I want you to rewrite this in the style of an Amazon listing. Okay,
Exactly.
it'll do it. And so you could start with what you have and just switch up that format. And so our garbage in, garbage out problem gets solved. Um, and then you could, if you want to make your life even easier, you could say, well, actually, output this as HTML. And so it'll keep the formatting, the bold. You copy that and just drop that into your your rich text editor on your product description, make your life easy. Or, there's plenty of books out there on copywriting formulas. You know, what's interesting about marketing and copywriting and sales letters is that's like an art form that's been around 100 years.
Mm,
Uh,
absolutely.
and the core principles don't change. And so you could find, Copy Hackers has tons of formulas and templates. If you want to try them, I mean, you could give it to ChatGPT, be like, hey, once you're into that product description mode, you'd be like, okay, now try writing me something based off this formula and give it the example. And copy editing, wordsmithing, that's where it really shines. And it's like, ideally, it's not going to hallucinate because it's starting. You're not asking it to come up with something. You're asking it to rewrite what you gave it.
That's right. Yeah, you have to guide it. I think the best AI result is being guided by somebody that is actually intelligently guiding it and saying, "Hey, here's how I want to write in this style. Here's a reference point and context for what we're writing about. Here's what we'd like it to do as a net effect." Right? You're guiding it, and of course, it's only as smart as it can be, and it's evolving. But you're absolutely right. You have to guide it the right way. It's only as smart as the guide, right? So you have to
Yeah.
give it the right direction, 100%. Make it purposeful, make it intentional. You know, at the end of the day, everybody has a different process, a creative process, a strategic process. What does your process look like when you work with a client, when you engage with a brand? Without giving too much away, we don't want to do that, but just overarching themes to success. From day one, what does that look like for you? Are you aligned on vision? Are you aligned on KPIs? Are you aligned on product and brand? What are the things you look at?
So we always want to, fundamentally, we know what the levers are. Like e-commerce as a business is such a simple formula. Traffic times average order value times conversion rate, and that's what you're going to make. If you tell me those three numbers for the last 30 days, I will then tell you, hey, here's what I think you're going to make this year. It's just not tough. Um, and so, all right, can we make any of those numbers go up and to the right? That's a win.
Mm,
But then how do we do it? Well, typically, by the time someone engages us, it's like they don't like their site for reasons. Either, they know, the first version they built it because they don't know how things are going to go. They don't know what they're selling yet. When you're starting, like you're your own customer, and then over time it evolves, and then your understanding evolves. So now you know all the issues. You know how you do it differently the second time. All right, brain dump. I want to know that. Tell me that. And then, all right, if people are in that position, guaranteed there's multiple sites where they go, man, I wish my site looked more like that. So then let's go through those together. And all right, let's figure out, okay, what is it you like about it? And what is the site doing that you like? All right, we got that. And then, what about your brand do you want to keep and your site do you want to keep?
mm,
What about it do we just want to throw out? And then, layer that through a filter of experience and best practices. And then suddenly you get a very original result, coming out the other side. And so we'll do either, depending on the engagement, you could just come up with a mock-up right in the Shopify theme editor very quickly. Or you want something custom, then the more traditional, like, hey, design it in Figma and then go through rounds of revisions with it.
makes sense. Yeah, it's great. How did the unofficial Shopify podcast help to shape your brand and your business? Yeah, I'm assuming it played a role. What did that look like?
Podcasting, near and dear to my heart. I'll give you the long-winded story there. Uh, you're starting the agency, we were doing WordPress development, and needed to find clients, and so got invited on a podcast. And this is like probably before Serial, or Serial's just starting in the podcasting universe. It's like before and after Serial. Um, and at the end, I would do these guest episodes, and I was a character, and people would go, "Oh, you're a natural. You should do your own podcast."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like and I didn't feel like a natural. There was just nervous energy was what they're hearing. And then, by the fourth time, you're like, okay, maybe. And so once we said, all right, we're going to just do Shopify exclusively, we're going to drop this WordPress nonsense. We're just doing Shopify only. They're the best. We decided we'll do a podcast. And we're like, we got to come up with a name. And we're like, well, it's about Shopify and it's unofficial. So it's the Unofficial Shopify Podcast. That's the working title. And then we'll just figure out the name later. And just
Yeah.
never did it.
Later never happened. Yeah.
It never happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then once we start publishing, okay, you start every month, you get a few more downloads, and that's encouraging. And then maybe someone reaches out and goes, "Hey, do you do sponsorships?" And you sell one sponsor, one episode. You're like, "Wow, I can't believe that worked." And then you get another, and then you sell it as a subscription. And now suddenly, what's so cool about that, your content marketing becomes a client deliverable. And so there's no more skipping it, right? in digital marketing, in especially like agency marketing like this, like we're doing, it is easy to well, cobbler's children have no shoes. When things get busy, it's easy to just ignore your own stuff, your own marketing. But now if you have sponsors and it's a client deliverable, there's no more
Can't
skipping
ignore it
it.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so I think ultimately the key to success there was consistency. The show is published every Tuesday unrelentingly for 10 years.
Good for you, man. It's a huge victory to be committed to something for so long and to do that in parallel with everything else happening. I mean, obviously we're doing that here. We're early. We've been running this show now. We've got like 15, 16 episodes live, right? And we've recorded many more, but not 500. It's the same idea, weekly podcast, and we're reaching people that are trying to change the game in their industries, right? That's what this is all about. And you've definitely done that. And it sounds to me like you've really owned a vertical and a niche that you really understand. And people love that. They love value behind what you're talking about, right? Because then at the end of the day, they can use that to help themselves, to help their brand, to help their business, to help their growth, their revenue, whatever it is they're looking to do. So it's awesome, man. Are there any Shopify apps that you're currently loving right now or recommending that you think look promising for the future?
Ooh, this is a good question because I use apps every day. A typical our stores are mainly mid-market, and those mid-market stores, they'll use 30, 40 apps is not unusual. Um, so really my advice here would be we always try to use Shopify's native tools first. And if that's not an option, then we go to apps. And of the apps, you just have to regularly review it and make sure, like, okay, are we actually using the stuff we pay for here? You'd be
Yeah,
amazed how often I find stuff
exactly. A lot of
people are
bloat.
paying for apps that
Yeah.
don't do anything. But I don't know, the apps I use every day and love are, like, so not exciting. Matrixify lets you import and export pretty much everything inside Shopify as a CSV. Wow, you know, for, someone doing the work and maintenance, getting everything into a spreadsheet's very exciting, right?
Yeah, of course.
Um, no, I live and die by that one. Shopify's native search and discovery tool, I'm surprised how often I use that. Their AI chatbot, Sidekick, I'm starting to use more. It's getting smarter and better. It's definitely my theory is it's an open AI agent, but it works. I like it. And, geez, and then we're we're in beta now on a free gift with purchase app because that's my favorite kind of promo.
Yeah, free gift with purchase, very cool.
Yeah.
What's your take on headless commerce and other things happening in the Shopify space? What's the takeaway there?
So headless, I think, you see people start trying to do it as like an unofficial third party thing, um, you know, before 2020, and then Shopify said, "Hey,
Mhm.
we're gonna give you official path for it," and it had limitations. It was a little clunky. Now that we've had several years of official support for it, less clunky, better supported, but it's still a trade off. And I think the deciding factor is not what you're gonna do with the website, because the Shopify theme editor is just like, "Hey, here's the HTML and CSS, do what you want." Um, it's but the thing you can't particularly change is the Shopify CMS, right? That's not yours to mess with.
Right.
That's what headless lets you do. You pair a CMS like Symphony to Shopify, well, now I could really kinda customize and define what my online store editor CMS is gonna look like and do in Symphony, but then still have on the back end, all my Shopify action. Like, because ultimately Shopify is a hub and the online store is a spoke you're plugging into it.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I get it. It makes a lot of sense. How do you see e-commerce evolving in 3 to 5 years? I mean, I have my own opinions of this and just the digital landscape as a whole, but where do you see it going? E-com specifically, 3 to 5 years. Projecting out. What's your takeaway on that high level?
The Well, all right, I would not bet on my opinion here, but in the past, I have heard that email is dead because of social media in 3 to 5 years, that websites are dead because apps will take over in 3 to 5 years. I've heard, et cetera, et cetera. It keeps going.
It keeps going.
Never happens. The landscape does change. Oh, and then, of course, that, checkout on a website is dead because Google, added it to Google Shopping and Facebook added it. Yeah, well, guess what? Facebook shut it down. It went away. So, okay, given that the current outlook is, well, AI agents will do our shopping for us. You'll just say, "Hey, what's the best running shoe?" And then it's gonna find it. It already knows your size and your preferences. It's like, "This one," and you go, "Yes," and then just buys it. That is, that's like the 3 to 5 year future outlook. I think that happens. I do. But the question then becomes is like, okay, how often? Does consumer behavior really change so much that like websites aren't even a thing anymore? I doubt it.
I don't see it either. I think there will be an evolution like anything else. Like when the iPhone came out, I remember when I got the iPhone, right? I brought it to my wife. She was a substitute teacher in the classroom. I brought it into the classroom. She was in kind of a lower income school district. I brought it in. I went inside, and the kids just went crazy. They're like, "He has an iPhone." This is 2008, right? He has an iPhone. How did he get an iPhone? They're like congregating around. And now, if you brought an iPhone in the classroom, it'd be like, "He has an iPhone." So, but it took so long. I mean, 2008 to current, right? That's like what, 17 years, right? Now, do I think it will take 17 years? No, of course not. With respect to commerce and web and everything else we're seeing with technology and AI, I think it will be faster than that, but probably more like 5 to 10. I don't think it'll be obsolete. I think it'll be an evolution. So I agree with you. And I think ultimately a lot of the things we're going to see are helping aids to guide our decisions. And you're right. It really comes down to the consumer. What will they adopt? Do they feel like they're being sold? Do they feel like they're being taken for a ride? Are they saving money? Will it be generational? Will it be millennial? Will it be Gen Z? Will it be Alpha? Who will it be? Right. So these are all great questions to ask. I don't know if anybody has those answers. I think the big brands want to have those answers, and they have a lot of research and data. Time will tell. Right. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. So, AI in the future of Shopify stores. When we talk about AI agents, as you said, what do you think the future will look like in the context of AI and Shopify specifically? Even projecting out in a year or two or whatever seems reasonable.
They just recently did their developer conference for the year, editions.dev, and their twice a year feature announcements, Horizons, or Editions, and then the most recent one was themed Horizons. And they're always very cool. They are. The presentation is really like A plus. But included in that one last month was May 2025 was this idea of Shopify Catalog, which is an API, application programming interface, where essentially like any AI or application could go and access and search the entirety of the Shopify catalog.
Wow.
And it's
Yeah.
opt-in by default. If you have products in the online store, they are public. They're available to the web. So why would they not be available in this new surface? And that's interesting. That the the evidence points to ChatGPT and Perplexity for sure get access to these things. And so when you ask them for recommendations, they could just search through the catalog and find it. And then, the next thing they announced was Global Cart. We don't have details on it, what it does, how it works, but essentially, hey, if it recommends shoes from one store and socks from another, you could still stick them in a single Shopify checkout, and I could just buy once and be done. And those are things, that's in the next 12 months. That's near future stuff.
That's cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and then they also added like it's called an MCP, Model Context Protocol, but a more formal way for a chatbot, an AI agent to query a store. And there's an app anyone can install now where you can start trying to add FAQ questions into that to like preempt, what these AIs may ask. It's kind of, there's not a lot you can or should do right now to optimize for AI beyond just the stuff you would do anyway for SEO. And that's like a whole nother conversation. Um, but I think the one thing you can do is just make sure like your product taxonomy is clean and consistent, because these systems are very reliant on structured, sensible data. So if you can do that now, like that's really that plus your regular SEO stuff. Now suddenly you're in a great position for if that AI agent future occurs down the road.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're seeing an uptick with LLM, large language model, and generative engine optimization, GEO. We're seeing that, like you said, whole nother conversation around SEO and GEO. But what's fascinating about it is how a lot of people, let's say marketers, I'm finding a lot of marketers are using these vehicles to search. And as you said, if things are clean and they're able to find information very easily and very readily, that helps a lot. So I agree 100%. If you were starting a brand from scratch today, some of my final questions here, what would you do differently? If you started today from ground zero, you're building a brand, you're building podcasts, you're building everything from the start. This is a brand new day. what would you do today differently than you did before, if anything?
I would probably lead with I I would take a path similar to you. Lead with the community. For me, the reason that I have not experienced burnout, at least like not in a detrimental way, is I lean on my why. And over time I have figured out my why is enable entrepreneurship. I love entrepreneurship. It has done so much for me. I have, studied it for the last 20 years. And in doing so, I want that as an option that is just as sensible as, starting a career for anyone who may be out there looking for that info. And so that's what keeps me going. So if I were to start over today, I would lead with that, in that community, and then professional services, apps, whatever it is, becomes secondary to it.
100%. Yeah, it's great. What advice would you give a bootstrap founder that's launching their first Shopify store in 2025? Today, they're launching from ground zero again. They're bootstrapped. There's not a lot of cash to work with. They're a founder. What advice would you give them?
Start a newsletter. Like if you only have so much resources, both time and money.
Yeah, yeah.
You could, Substack, Beehive, these various newsletter subscription platforms. That's really high value, high signal, high context social media in itself now. Like newsletters reinvented. This really
It's
cool stuff.
huge. It's really cool.
Uh,
Yeah.
and there's big value in staying top of mind. Ultimately, if you can get in people's inbox with your name and that subject line, man, it like barely even matters if they actually read the email. That's what's so weird with newsletters, because you're there, you're top of mind.
Right. You're always there. You're always in front of them. Yeah. And then they start to see that all the time and it becomes top of mind. It's top of mind authority uh, concept. And you're absolutely right. The more top of mind you are in sales, just like this, the easier it is to then create the relationship. So you're absolutely right. And this is the same idea of starting a Shopify store as a bootstrap founder. It's the same concept. So awesome, man. Well, you are definitely becoming radical. I love what you've built. I love what you're continuing to build. We will continue cheering you on every step of the way from our side. Where can people find you? Where can they learn about you? Socials, podcast, website, brand, business, anything else you'd like to share?
Of course, if you Google Kurt Elster, you'll find my website that has my newsletter and links to everything. I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn. Happy to have you follow me there. And of course, if you like podcasts, just search the Unofficial Shopify Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Amazing, man. Well, thank you for being here today. Everything will be in the show notes. We appreciate you being here. We're excited to watch you again continue to grow and evolve. And we'll definitely have to chat offline at some point about everything else on the horizon. So thank you again.
Yeah, my honor and pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Radical. If today's episode sparked something in you, follow wherever you listen. Join the conversation and share it with someone ready to think beyond limits. Be unlimited, be bold, and become radical. See you next time.
Game over.